episode 41 of the Bithell Games Podcast. I'm Alexander Slawinski.
And who's that? It's Mike Bithell.
Each week we talk games, what it's like to make games, and the random stuff we don't generally find time to talk about because we're playing and or making games. Show notes. Show notes.
I was trying to do the hype man thing coming underneath you.
Woo, woo, woo. Show notes. Now it got old-timey. Show notes. Thanks for everyone who's been leaving a review of Subsurface Circular on their platform of choice. On Steam, we've reached the overwhelmingly positive stat, and we absolutely couldn't have done that without your support.
When you're saying a pre-scripted signal to the audience that we respect and are very grateful to them in a very humble and good way, the voice, I'm not sure if it helps. I'm very grateful and it's cool. That is really cool, though. Getting to that number helps us in a lot of ways. It means the first thing people see when they get to the page is overwhelmingly positive. I think it probably helps it get served as a recommendation as well, although I have no evidence of that. So I think that's going to help us in a lot of ways. And
the reviews have been lovely, just in general, from the audience.
Yeah, and even the negative ones have been really informative on the whole. On the whole.
Let's not encourage those, though. But yeah, no, it's
if
been
you're
going...
listening to this, to episode 41 of season 2 of our podcast, and you don't like us, then you know what? I think you've earned the right to give us a negative review. That's hours of your life.
There is you do know about stock hating, right? Stalker haters.
Why not? This is the best intro we've ever done, by the way. Go on, tell me about So this is people who hate you and follow you as a result of that.
Correct. They hate you and they follow you and they do negative things towards they shouldn't even they go out of their way to exist within your realm and then just constantly hate on you. This, in media, this is pretty common.
I've been very lucky then. I think I've generally either avoided or muted all of those, I think.
Yeah, no, you definitely... Yeah,
I've muted a lot of people, so if you're seeing negative stuff sent to me and I'm not picking up on it, it's probably because I've secretly muted that person. Muting's great because they never know. They're just shouting into the abyss and they don't know. It's great.
Well, that's
such
the
an existentially way of being cruel to someone. It's good.
Well, that was the best. Back in the day, in the comments section, you could actually...
Best intro ever. Carry on.
You could essentially remove their throat. They would drop comments constantly, but they were the only ones who could see those comments.
What's that called? A soft block or soft? There was a name for that, wasn't there? I remember.
I forget what it was called, but essentially,
they would never know that they couldn't be heard, basically.
Yeah, so the only way they ever found out that they weren't,
if they logged out, presumably.
Yeah, exactly. They would have to log out and then look at and there was I wish we had gotten to the second version of that comment section where it would just leave fake replies to them, there would be good bots that would just reply to them so that they actually thought they were having a rage conversation with someone, but there's no one there.
That's really dark.
It's just bots.
Comments were a mistake. I think as a society we have to own up to the fact that comment sections were a terrible, terrible mistake. Reviews are great, though, and we welcome them and encourage them, and they've been really helpful, so thank you very much, listener. What have you been playing, Alexander?
I've been playing Wolfenstein, and I played a little Wolfenstein, and then a little bit of Wolfenstein II. But I did play the first one all the way through. It's fantastic. It's a fantastic...
It really is.
A fantastic B movie, and not B movie in any type of negative sense.
It knows what it is, right?
It is structured. It is structured as a B movie. It knows exactly what it is and owns it.
I think some of the writing transcends it as well. I think there were definitely, especially with the first one, there was definitely writing there that was better than it should be. Some of the narration, some of the depth that they go to there was really liked, actually.
Even this is going to sound weird. Even the sex scenes, and the way
pretty tastefully done.
It was treated really well. You had
number 2 less so, but the first one definitely the sex scenes were.
See, I didn't.
Well, it was a romance, wasn't it? That was quite
Yes.
a believable love story there. Yeah, it's nice.
Two people put in an extraordinary situation that kind of lust after each other, but are also still respectful at the same time. It worked out pretty well.
It's a story about grown-ups.
Yeah, and then I started to, and I don't think that's happening.
You bounced off it pretty quickly, didn't you? I remember you sent me a message very quickly saying it wasn't for you. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I said.
That's what you said. You said, while I fully respect the team who put this together, it's not my cup of tea. Thank you and goodbye. I think that was the message. I think that's how I remember it.
Yes. Yes. I'm sorry, we're going to do the crown now.
We're not going to do the crown. So put this, if we seem in a silly mood, it's because we've just been talking for 10 minutes pre-record in Elizabeth II, the crown voices. And Alexander's kind of getting used to the whole British thing. We need to this is terrible, by the way. We're doing a terrible job with this podcast. We have to fix this. So tell me about where Wolfenstein 2 went wrong for you. What didn't connect with you in that game?
In a very calm way, not like the way I embarrassed myself at BAFTA the other week.
What did you do at BAFTA?
When we had this conversation at BAFTA with our colleague, and I was asked about Wolfenstein 2, and I kind of expressed myself the way I did in your Skype chat.
I'm recalling this conversation. Yeah. So So in a more calm approach, go for it.
In a calm and more respectful approach.
Because to be clear, I liked Wolfenstein 2 to put some balance into the show. So
yeah, which I'm
can't
surprised.
Comprehend. Go on. Tell me why you didn't. Tell me why you didn't. Because then we can talk about it.
So from my understanding, from people that I've spoken to, one of the things that actually probably harmed me the most in Wolfenstein 2 is that I came right off the first one, and the first one is objectively stronger than the second one.
I'd agree with that. It's definitely. I was going to say purer, but in the context that seems like the wrong word. But it felt more pointed in its vision, more direct.
Yeah. So the second one, I absolutely had some fundamental problems with the beginning. I did not appreciate the dog section at all, and that's
a bit of a trigger for you, right? You do not like violence towards animals in your stories.
I don't, but again, with something like John Wick starts with violence against like innocent animals, and I feel there is a proper immediate response to it. The same way I think there is a
John Wick takes a very measured and solid response to the violence to his dog. You're right. That's the movie. John Wick, reasonable. That's the subtitle. Yeah.
But I put the same thing forth in Guardians of the Galaxy 2, without spoilers. When there is the major revelation, Star-Lord reacts in a measured and immediate response to the revelation, and I think that is ethically the right thing to do, and that's and that's.
You'd go so far as you mean ethically in terms of the person telling the story. You mean as like you want a storyteller to give that immediate kind of response,
and that's that's another reason I have a sort of concern with the way it is, because apparently you do resolve that, and you apparently resolve
that plot
it.
Comes to a conclusion. Yes.
I
think as well the argument. So the scene is very early in the game. I feel okay if you're not played Wolfenstein, maybe fast forward 5 minutes, but it's very early in the game. You have an abusive dad, Nazi, horrible man. We're definitely making a point that that fascism didn't get born in Germany in the 30s and nowhere else. That this was maybe a more prevalent issue in the period, and all periods, I guess. And he's trying to force you to shoot your dog, right? And you can or you cannot, and if you don't, he does it. And it's a horrible scene about a child being abused, basically, by their father. And it's I think quite a bold way to open your B-movie sequel. And yes, that does That to me, that serves a narrative purpose. Like, it establishes a lot of the themes of the game in terms of, what racism is, what Nazis are, what, the history of the world outside of Germany has had in its past, and all this stuff. And there is a payoff, but I agree with you, it's not in the moment, and it leaves you with a hunger to solve that, which some could argue is like any inciting incident in a story. John Wick doesn't, lose his dog and then instantly 2 minutes later kill everyone responsible, right? Like, that hunger is paid off. Maybe it's the lack of directness. Maybe it's because it's a flashback, and when you get back to the main character, he's like, he's older and he doesn't care, kind of thing. Like, it's not, and there's no immediate impetus. Maybe that's it, that the character seems to have gotten over it and you haven't. Is that maybe it? Maybe
it's also sort of the murder aspect of things. Like, there are plenty of stories of parental abuse or a family member abusing someone in a physical or other way.
Sure.
And I've absolutely, like, Homicide, a really good show that many people, but Andre Braugher, that's where actually he got started. But Homicide had a really good plot line at one point where one of the detectives starts, and this is problematic now in a modern context, of course, but he starts exploring his sexuality, and then they sort of tie it back to he was abused by a family member, and he sits with that family member and like feeds him and takes care of him, like, and it's problem, right? Like, in a modern context, it is absolutely problematic.
Not aged magnificently, that, from the
no, but in something like Wolfenstein, or the after like with that abuse, like, it's just, okay, cool, he shot my dog, I'm gonna put 2 more bullets into this gun and I'm gonna kill him immediately.
But you are playing a kid in that moment, right? And a kid doesn't necessarily do that. I definitely hear what you're saying, and I think it's a really interesting difference between game story and movie story. Is that a movie, if you're sat there, you're watching John Wick, and I didn't see John Wick with you, and I would love to have been sat next to, or I would have hated to be sat next to you in John Wick. When that scene happens, I know, you don't like violence towards animals in your entertainment, and I totally get that. I'm vegetarian, so I can equate. In that moment, you are so angry at the film, right? Because it's like, a horrible thing, how dare you, this is grotesque, I want everyone dead.
But no, I'm not angry at the film. No, that's the thing. I'm not angry at the film.
But you're hungry for blood, right? You want revenge. And with a movie, they can pay that off for you within 45 minutes. With a game, if it's 8 hours long, and you're playing it across 3 sessions, you're not going to get that payoff. And it's an interesting difference that with a film narrative, you can set something up and have the audience genuinely, like, really riled up, and pay it off, like, at the end, and it's fine because it's only an hour's passed. Whereas here, you've bounced off of the game, which would give you catharsis, would give you that moment later.
I'll actually give another example. I'll actually give another example of this because I'm sure that there are plenty of folks listening to this right now and going like, yeah, but there is the payoff. So what's the problem? So there is another.
I see what you mean.
But there is another example of this that still bothers me to this day. Is Stephen Fry's character in Fable 2. He is genuinely not a good person, deserves to die, and somehow is necessary, like, to everything. But in a game like Fable, you should have had the option to, like, he kills innocent people, and there is no way of getting back at him in that one. Now the third one's different. But in that moment, it is this conscious decision made on the part of the team that, for whatever reason,
they're going to remove choice for that moment.
You're removing choice, and that's the part that irks
it's interesting.
me.
I mean, I don't disagree with you. I think there's a really interesting thing here about dramatic tension, and about, because you want your audience to desire something at all times when you're watching something. When you want an audience, I mean, romance, right? Like, romance narratives are always about, I want them to get together, I want them to get together, I want them to get together. Oh, they got together, that's great. Revenge fantasies are, I want him dead, I want him dead, I want him dead. Oh, he's dead, great. And the pacing of that, it's interesting how that has a different effect on games. But also because games are so much about like wanting to enact your will as well. If you don't feel, because you feel, it's not just that that's delayed, it's that you feel like you had an opportunity where you wanted to enact your revenge and you weren't able to. It's interesting. It's an interesting narrative problem. And I think games avoid, I think it's one of the reasons games often avoid telling stories like this that go to that complexity, because it does introduce these kind of challenges, for sure.
And then also, I'm about to take a Bithellism. And fair play to the...
fair play.
Yeah, fair play. But fair play to the Fallout 3 team. They actually fixed a major plot hole at the end of Fallout 3, where there is a nuclear reactor, and you have to send someone or yourself in there to fix this. And you could have a mutant companion with you who are immune to radiation, and I think the original, but they definitely changed the ending to Fallout 3 to plug that hole. But that is obviously a Fallout game, and it's a much different concept than what we have here, where, like you said, this is supposed to be an inciting incident, and from a narrative perspective, it has a payoff, but the payoff is supposed to be in a different context.
Is the problem, I wonder if the problem's agency. Let's do a thought experiment. So same scene, right? The scene in question, the dad gives you a gun, he tells you to shoot the dog. If you refuse to, he takes the gun, shoots the dog. If that scene was, you're there, you're tied to a chair, your character can't move or do anything, the dad shoots the dog and punches you in the face, end of scene. Would that bother you? Because there was no opportunity in the game for you to hurt him. You weren't given, there was no possibility space in which you could stop him.
Correct. I'm fine with that.
You're fine with that.
I'm fine with that because that's
given an agency, and then you feel that agency's been betrayed, is what you're
correct. Saying. It's the same thing as the choice you have to make at the beginning of Wolfenstein between the two people, and you make the choice, and then you have no time to react. There's nothing you can do in the spaces in between to fix what has gone wrong there. And with that scene, it's just you either have to pull the trigger on the dog or pull the trigger off to the side. But I sat there for literally 2 minutes waiting for the dad to knock me out or to do something so that the scene would continue going forward, because you're basically sitting me there with a loaded gun, and it's just like, okay, start screaming get in my face, just get in front of the gun, like in any way, so that I can pull the trigger with you in front of the gun. Even if I had blown off,
obviously.
Even if I had, actually, it gets good. Even if I had the ability to blow off his hand, right, and then he killed the dog, that would have been something. That would have been something different.
But I get that their argument. If I was a writer from that game and I was in the room, I would also make the argument that they want you to be hungry for revenge, because that's going to power you through the next 6 hours of the game, right? But I mean, the thing is, they tie that gun. If I remember right, the gun is even tied down, right? It's made very clear you don't have freedom of movement with the gun. But even then, just the act of giving you the power over the gun has introduced a whole bunch of thoughts to your head that wouldn't be there if the scene hadn't given you a gun.
So another example, Kingsman. So in Kingsman, there is the scene where
spoilers again for, I guess, Kingsman.
Yeah, spoilers for Kingsman. Yeah. But also Hydra. Hydra has the exact same tactic as well, where you are given a dog, and then you are supposed to shoot the dog. Yeah. That's the thing that the Kingsman. Now, the problem I have with that scene is I would have immediately shot Michael Caine.
Shorter movie.
Huh?
Shorter movie. Carry on.
Yeah, but I would have immediately shot Michael Caine. Yeah. Because that's the right thing to do in that situation. Because if someone
they don't want the right, isn't that the point? Like Kingsman. Sorry, definitely spoilers for Kingsman. Please stop listening. Kingsman is about that is a corrupt older body of people, right? I've not seen the sequel. I assume the sequel forgets this. But in the first one, the whole point is that whole exercise is a demonstration that that they are a corrupt group of people who don't want good people. They want people who follow orders, which is what the test is designed to do. It's not about making the right ethical choice. It's about making the subservient ethical choice. It's about the British class structure and inherently... But it is, though. It's about...
No, it totally is. It absolutely
it's about how you're meant to just kind of do what Daddy says in that kind of context. And that's... So I don't think you're meant to think that the right choice is to kill the dog. I think you're meant to think that that's the wrong choice and that Michael Caine should get shot. And as I said, spoilers, shooting Michael Caine would the movie
would have been the right thing to do. But then we go back to Wolfenstein II, right? Like, so you're telling me in between that space where he has done something wrong. We could go into and this is what I'm saying. Yeah. Like this thing doesn't end because this starts becoming a conversation about abuse and coming from abusive backgrounds. It's also about
the ethical, because it's interesting. Both your examples are about an animal versus a human, and the ethics of is a human life equivalent to a dog's life, and that kind of. And we don't need to get into that.
Oh, no, we're not going to get into that.
But that's a whole... Like, do you see what I mean, though? There's lots of ethical weightings involved here, and it's... But I take your point on Wolfenstein. I think Wolfenstein 2... I mean, my issues with Wolfenstein 2 is that it's just not... I don't think it takes advantage of the opportunity of what does Nazi America look like. That's my big thing with it, is just that you've got this really great scene in kind of a main street
You're kind of living through it right now, so... Yay! No,
best podcast ever. But you get like a level in like Main Street USA where it's like it's like Disneyland. It's like just like this kind of romanticized historical version of what America, of proper quote unquote America looks like. From a whitewashed version of history, and then they put the swastikas and the Ku Klux Klan in there, and you're like, wow, that's subversive. That's interesting. And then you've got a scene in the White House, but you can barely tell it is the White House until you actually think about where the landmarks are. And that's about it. And it's like America is such a defined cultural place. So many landmarks, so many incredibly iconic locations that it just feels like you could come up with some really great like levels and locations, because the first game does every B-movie Nazi base in history, right? The moon base, the this, the that. But like, I wanted Wolfenstein 2 to have let me come up with some awful ones off the top of my head. It does have a diner in it, that's good, but I wanted it to have the Grand Canyon. I wanted like a dog fighter over the Grand Canyon. I wanted a Nazi spy base set up in the Statue of Liberty. And the Statue of Liberty has been altered so that her hand is up in the air, in the salute rather than with the torch. I wanted like every, awful like key idol of American culture taken and played with.
All the Cub Scouts in Yosemite are like, it's like a Nazi youth thingy.
Yeah, I mean, New York, they do New York, but it's a New York that kind of hasn't got any of that you can't tell is New York for plot reasons. It just doesn't feel like they're taking the opportunity of the place that their game's set, which is a shame. That was my main concern with it. I didn't mind about the stuff you're talking about particularly.
Well, and then also I got turned off by the first couple levels, and then the mirroring of the choice, like that she holds you down the exact same way that like Death's Head held you down, and it's just
I think that one in particular, because I think if it's been a couple of years since you played the first one, that's a fun nostalgic moment. If you played it, you played them back to back, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
but she was terrifying in the first one. She wasn't goofy. Like her monologue at the beginning of 2, like when she's doing that speech, and then she's really abusive to like her chubby daughter, and that whole entire thing is just like so overdone. It's not B movie. Like it's it's something else, and I'm done talking about this. Like, it's just, maybe I'll go back to it at some point. And
I think it's worth it just for, I would say, the back half of it. And I'm the first person, if someone says to me, oh, you should watch this TV show, it gets really good at episode 7. I'm the first guy who says, well, I'm not going to watch that then. I'm not going to watch 6 episodes. I don't enjoy every TV show. But like, it does get better towards the back half. The space level, because I think it's going to be an obligatory thing, you got to do a space level, is genuinely really clever and interesting and funny and weird and historically cool, like where they go with it. And there's a few levels like that are really solid, but they're all towards the back end of the game. Like it almost feels like it's filler. It's the middle game in a trilogy, and I hope that they really go for it with the third one. But yeah, it was worth playing. I'm glad I played it.
Normally at this point we would do what's going on at the studio, but we're doing stuff. There are things, like, nothing really intense. I mean, we could talk about how when you're sick, like Mike's been all week, you should probably take it easy and get healthy, because it'll hurt you on the other side of things if you don't take care of yourself. But that's really hippy dippy stuff.
Yeah, no, I got sick. Stuff's going on a lot. We're in a similar position to where we've been in the past on this podcast, where we're heading into some quite secret stuff behind the scenes, and that means that. Oh, should we talk about? No, we can't talk about that. Oh, should we talk? No, we can't talk about that. Oh, that's not interesting. We can't talk about that. So sorry about that. So yeah, let's skip it. And I'll try and get better. Thanks for talking about how I don't look after myself. Damn. What a horrible opportunity for me to find out here on the Bithell Games Podcast.
That you don't take care of yourself properly?
Yeah, no, that's
revelations.
Cuts deep, man. Cuts deep.
1, 2, 3. I wanna thank you for reading the freedom mail again. Thank you for reading the freedom mail again.
Dear Mike and Alex, I believe the game developer career is one that should be celebrated. I'm in it for the love and craft like everybody else, but I would be lying if I said I wasn't a bit fame hungry too. I want to see a future where developers get the same amount of respect and attention as, say, musicians or film creators. Are video games not mainstream enough? Or do people simply not care about the creators behind them? In your eyes, what steps do you think individual developers and the community that surrounds it can do to make this a reality? So he ended the email there, immediately sending this follow-up. So I'm just going to add the follow-up right into it.
Was that for okay? Go for it.
I would like to add that I do realize that there are a select few that break out of this mold, like the Kojimas and the Tim Schafers of the world. Very talented developers, but man, oh man, they slap their names on everything they possibly can. Hideo,
you can't have it both ways.
Hold on. That's why I had to put this part in here too.
Go on.
A Hideo Kojima game, a psychic adventure from the mind of Tim Schafer. I'm not sure how I feel about this, but do you think this is in good taste? Is this what is necessary to become well known? And this comes to us from Danny P. So plenty of stuff to unpack here.
Cheers, Danny P. And thank you for writing to the Bithell Games Podcast. I'm Mike Bithell. I'm very excited to tell you about that. Taking a break from our latest Bithell project. No, it's, you know what? It's a very good question. It's a fair question. And I think both parts of it are fair. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, so I'll go first.
You talk about this stuff a lot.
I do. And because I do, coincidentally, yes, the name of the company is Bithell, and it is
as it should be.
It is the Bithell Games Podcast, and the creative director is Mike Bithell. So it all. I
hear he's a horrible man. I hear he's a terrible person.
He's all right. He tries to create a supportive community of
tries.
So the thing about the name thing is you and I have I don't think this is a secret. You and I have absolutely had the conversation of like Mike Bithell's Thomas Was Alone, right? Like, do you put your name before the name?
Well, I hate it.
the project, right?
But I think I'm pretty out there as being someone who very grudgingly puts my name on things because other people make me.
And I don't know Danny P's age, so I don't know if he was around for like the great example of this is American McGee. American McGee had a really marketable name. His name is American McGee. Like it is that is something that when you saw it on a box, you thought, okay, so it's like National Lampoon or something. Like, no, he was a developer. Like he makes games. But his name was on the box, and it elevated this, or it gave a branding to the games. And several years later, David Jaffe actually spoke about this pretty openly in the mid-noughts, where he was, where he expressed like, why shouldn't it be David Jaffe's God of War, right? Why can't we all be, Sid Meier, and have our name before the title of a game? Now, where that starts to get interesting is, something like Sid Meier's Civilization. Okay, cool. Sid Meier's Alpha Centauri. Well, that was Brian Reynolds, right? Like, there's and it all sort of starts to fall apart from that, because there is games are made by teams, and we could easily go into a giant discussion of auteur theory here, but we're not going to. I know. But games are made by teams. So when those decisions are made, I usually would think of them more as a marketing opportunity than reality. It's definitely
it's not about fairness, is it? It's
right. It's not about fairness. It's not about reality.
That sucks, I think.
It is a conscious decision made by either depending on who's the group or the marketing individuals, that if we slap this name at the top of this title, it will move X more units than if we hadn't. And that's where that comes from.
And crucially, if this game is well received, the next game, which has a completely different title, through association by that name, will now do better. Because if we build this name up, if this name has, and you see that with studio names as well as individual names.
So, are video games not mainstream enough? No, let's toss that one aside. Like, video games are absolutely mainstream enough. That there's a huge generational shift going on right now. You now have video game players who, from an average purchasing point, average playing point, are more than middle age. So no, it is. Do you simply not care about the creators behind them? No. That's a more interesting one, but
hey, Alexander.
Yeah.
Who directed Captain America: Civil War?
No idea.
Who directed the latest Thor movie?
Oh, that was the guy that did Moana.
Yes. Well, he started it.
Well, he started Moana.
Yeah.
It's something like it's something like Waikiki, like something like that.
Waititi, yeah, Taika Waititi. It's and that's interesting. So that would be my counter is, and this is across all media. I feel like actually the film industry is trying to catch up with games on this, because it's actually very good for the film company if you don't know that David Jaffe exists, right? To use the example of God of War, it is because God of War, the new one, is not being made by David Jaffe. I don't know, maybe he's a consultant or something, but he's not the director of it. And therefore, if that was a movie, if you were watching, when the third Jurassic Park movie was directed by someone other than Spielberg, that signaled to the audience, oh, this is different, this is lesser maybe. You see that with these, you see it with movies, with movie stars. Film studios are working very hard to make you remember Iron Man more than you remember Robert Downey Jr. They're working very hard to give you, to get you away from people, because people can not be replaced. You can't fire, but you can keep Iron Man. Iron Man they'll always own. It's the person in the suit that's the problem. And I think that's something the film industry is getting better at. That said, like, it is, auteur theory stuff is nonsense, and it is a problem that, you know, that we do summarize Jurassic Park to Steven Spielberg. That's not fair on the enormous number of amazingly talented people he works with. But yeah, it's marketing choice, as Alexander says. That's the big thing. And it's a marketing choice that does make money, and we benefit, especially us, and this is something we've talked about in the team a lot. And it's the reason the company was called Bithell Games. People are always surprised it wasn't my decision. I didn't want to call the company Bithell Games. I had lots of witty names that I wanted to call the company. The reason we chose Bithell Games was because the team said to me, we'll sell more copies if we can put From the Creator of Thomas Was Alone on stuff than if we just bring out, in this case, volume. And they were right, and, you know, we've stuck with it, and it is working, and you see Steam reviews that say, oh, I love Mike Bithell's art. It's like, I've never drawn anything for our games or modeled anything for our games. I direct it, but, like, that's lots of other people. If you say you like my art, you're actually talking about Daz Watford, probably. Or you're talking about Nick Tringali or Wayne Peters or any of them. So many of them on different games. But it's a marketing umbrella term. What's really interesting with games recently has been that indies have kind of risen because we have a ability over our own names. They tried this with, like, Cliffy B, right? That was the moment where a big company tried to create a megastar, and the problem, of course, they have is that Cliffy B can leave Epic and do his own thing, and then that's a lot of investment they've made over the years in building up his brand, only to lose him. Whereas, you know, my much smaller brand is something that is attached to me and I'll be able to carry with me forever. And
because we don't really have the concept of production houses the way, so like J.J. Abrams, right? Like Westworld, the Cloverfields, that type of stuff that comes from their production studio and the incubation that goes on there.
We have studios like Naughty Dog, right? And I think you see it a little bit with Neil Druckmann, right? Like, Neil Druckmann has definitely, who's the writer since Amy left, is like the kind of the name at the top of Naughty Dog in terms of, I think, the average kind of player's perspective. So do you mean like that, like a Naughty Dog kind of situation?
But then it becomes a situation of if he leaves, right?
Sure.
Like, this is actually one of my favorite lines from The Insider. There was a movie called The Insider, not the greatest movie in the world, but there's a really good line in it that kind of reflects media and fame. And Al Pacino's character turns around and he says, you know, my name. It's like it's Ira Bloomberg or something. Like, he was a producer at 60 Minutes, and he turns around and he says, I'm Ira Bloomberg from 60 Minutes. Take 60 Minutes away from my name. Who am I? Like, do I still have the power? And so, you know, I do question, especially in this industry, cool, take Sid Meier away from sort of the base of power and the people he's had around him. Like, take Neil Druckmann away from Naughty Dog. You know, like, Amy's had challenges, since
but
that.
you look at someone like Hideo Kojima, obviously, and he's absolutely managed to translate that to, and, you know, Cliff got the opportunity to do his thing, and, like, there is I don't know. I think you're right. I think it fades. I guess that's the thing, is you have to make good on your name very quickly elsewhere in order to maintain the reputation. But it is all nonsense. I think that's the other thing that's worth saying. Like, it is nonsense. The names you've heard about are just people who've put some effort into doing this. Obviously, they're people who've made great works, or, you know, worked with teams that have made great works. But, like, it is just marketing. It is weird to me. I must admit, like, it is weird to me that we don't have. You wouldn't think twice about, like, a movie director being on a talk show, whereas, like, an equivalent level game director would never get that kind of opportunity or that kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like, it's not celebrity. No one cares who I'm dating. No, sometimes when, you know, you do type in a game developer's name into Google, and they will have, like, you know, wife or net worth next to their name, but it's not the same, is it? We're not celebrities.
I don't think the industry is there yet. I think that's certainly coming, and if you know, we survive.
You know who's jumping on it? It's the actors. The actors are very savvy with it. I'm seeing a lot of the voice actors, you know, doing marketing kind of style campaigns, guesting on every show. I mean, Troy Baker's been doing it for years, but I forget his name, but the chap who plays the protagonist in the latest Assassin's Creed is a guy who I'm seeing on everything right now. Our friend Rahul Kohli is also on everything. I think there's a generation of actors who are either in video game culture or nerd culture or kind of adjacent to it. Max Landis is doing this a lot. He's a film director, but it's the same kind of idea of these people are being very savvy and getting involved more in nerd culture kind of stuff on YouTube and whatever. So I think the opportunity's there, but it's a double-edged sword as well, because you can very easily become hated. That's the other thing. I mean, that follow-up email kind of mentioning this person's name's on everything. I mean, I get that. I get people saying that I'm egotistical or whatever because of the company being called Bithell Games, or worse, actually, often. And that's not nice. It's not nice having strangers on the internet hate you. That's not very pleasant. So there is definitely a downside to trying and getting that kind of level of... I quite like where we're at, because I think we're known enough that our games get to be made. That's about the level I want to be at, I think. Yeah,
so to I guess the last one from Danny P was, he admits it, a little bit fame hungry too. So is that naming thing what's necessary to become well known?
I'd be hard-pressed to think of someone in recent times who's got that reputation without putting their name out there.
It's a challenge.
But I don't know the names of the Cuphead guys, for example. I'm sure if I was a mega fan of that game, I would. But, it's definitely not crossed over into the lexicon in the same way as, Rami. You know what I mean? It's names... I feel you do have to put yourself out there if you're going to get that. But I really think that's a double-edged sword. It's dangerous.
Yeah.
And also, extrinsic motivation is troubling anyway. It's okay to want to be famous. That's a very human thing. But, take it from someone who's made, very successful games and not so successful games and, everything in between. It's lovely when you're on the up, but, it's if your sense of, achievement is tied to how much people are talking about you, that's not very healthy. That's that can go very wrong very quickly for you. So I would, Danny, be careful. Be careful out there, Danny P.
Yeah, because it can go very wrong, and we won't talk about those examples right now, but there are... if you follow this industry, you know that there's names
everyone will have in their head right now of people who got too... They like Icarus, they flew too close to the sun.
Yeah, and now they're still making games. They're definitely still making games, but the marketing department, PR, they ain't letting that name get anywhere public.
Yeah.
So just be aware of that, dear Danny. Dear Danny. Moving on.
Sure.
Hi, Mike and Alexander. For thematic purposes, this is the part of the email where compliments regarding the podcast and or games occur. So I'd like it if you would each write a compliment you think the other would like to hear and then read it out. Please refrain from addressing the glamour, class, or otherwise physical aspects of one another, as this is an audio medium and such comments fail to convey what either of you looks like, leaving far too much up to the listener's imagination.
I feel this email already is taking far too much effort and not making any effort. You know what I mean? It would have been just easier to say I like Thomas Was Alone. You know what I mean? This.
Are you saying
you want to do this? You want to say? Should we pay each other compliments?
Are you saying it insists upon itself?
It does. It very much insists upon itself. Do you want to do it?
Yeah, we'll do a nicey thing sometime in the future.
One day when we're both in our 70s, we'll turn to each other and say, "You know what? I thought you were all right.
You were all right.
You were all right."
Those shenanigans aside, on to my questions. As both of you are writers, why do you think by and large the writing in games and the stories told are so poor? Also, could you talk about your writing editing process for your games? Thanks for the podcast. I've now listened to every episode, but such is the privilege of a stay-at-home dad whose daughter will only sleep while being walked. If she'd nap in a cot like a normal kid, I'd get to play more games.
While being walked, so like in a pram, I assume. Not like he's not like walking her down the street.
No. Hold on. Regards, Greg from Helsinki. I think he actually means he puts her in that mech hammock that you can put a kid in front of like you, and then just walk around like a mech with the little pilot right on your like.
Has someone done that? Someone's done that cosplay, right?
I've never seen it, but
someone needs to do that cosplay.
But every single time I've ever had to babysit a kid, and then the parents just put that.
It's like was it a papoose? What's it called?
I don't know what it's called.
I know exactly what you mean. It's like a sling thing that.
Yeah. It's basically like a bulletproof vest with like a little extra like thing.
Like all your examples are like military technology.
Yeah, but with like a little baby holder in the front, and then you put the baby in it, and then I can't help it every single time start making RoboCop noises in my head as I'm walking.
Okay. All right. So this has been a great podcast for going off on a limb. So the first part, I feel like we've had that whole Wolfenstein conversation, which is good. But go on, what do you think the flaws are in video game writing, Alexander? Because you've spent many years, critiquing, reviewing, writing about games. Where do you think the holes are?
I think especially now, being on this side of the equation, I think it comes down to collaboration of structure, of making decisions that fit the gameplay. That these are two things that go hand in hand, and that conversation starts early and is worked through just as we would expect most of the other processes in video game development to be done. And I think especially in the early days, and certainly there are examples from the last decade or so as well, when a story is tacked on, or it is just it is trying to come up with excuses for levels or excuses for the level.
Yeah, it's after the fact. Yeah.
Like that type of stuff is why I think, and I think poor is too harsh. I think you have really good writers doing the best they can with what they got. And it's not the greatest. It's not the greatest story ever told in video games, but the fact that you got any story is a win on that count. So yeah, I don't, and I also think it's kind of unfair to say by and large the writing, games, and stories told are so poor, because I think there has been a huge leap forward over the last decade or so in making sure that that type of overlap is working out really well. Like I look at something like Battle Chef Brigade from the last that just came out recently, and that's a game that's where the story is absolutely not completely tied into the gameplay that's going on, but it still works functionally. Like it's hitting the beats that it needs to hit. It has really good character development. It's doing all of these really interesting things. But was that story built from the ground up and everything? No, it wasn't. But it's still a really good game with a really good story, and I think that's fairly common now. Is that okay? So congratulations, you didn't. We don't always get the Dark Knight, but you're still getting Batman Beyond, and you're still getting the whatever the third one was called that.
Batman Beyond was a cartoon. Are you sure you mean Batman Beyond? You mean Batman Begins, right?
Batman Begins, sorry.
Yeah, Batman Beyond, I mean, it's good, but I didn't think it was the thing you were going for. And then, was it Dark Knight Returns?
I remember.
No, Dark Knight Returns, of course, is the comic. Now, what's the last one called? Oh my god. Yeah, see?
Rises. It was Rises.
That's the one.
The Dark Knight Rises.
Anyway, no, I agree with what you're saying. I think there's a massive misconception. I don't think necessarily this is a misconception the email writer has, but I think there is a big misconception out there that writing is about scripts and that side of things, and that it's about like just writing dialogue, and you write a script and you hand it in, and if it's good writing, it's good writing, and if it's bad, writing is about more than that. It's about, like you say, story and structure, and collaboration is a part of that, but just anything that affects the consistency with which a story is being told, and the way that's supported through a process. I know, friends who write for AAA who, will work out, okay, this is the story we're going to tell. It's going to arc like this, and it's going to be told over these 10 levels. And then the development team will say, okay, well, we can't do level 9. We're going to have to cut, and marketing tells us that level 7 needs to be in the trailer, so we have to move level 7 back to level 2 or 3. We have to bounce this around so that things are in the right order for that. And also we're going to cut out level 5 is going to be a standalone DLC, I think, that can go separately. And then you've got this kind of massacred story, and it's not that the writer did a bad job, and arguably the team did what was right for the game in terms of kind of structuring, maybe not with the DLC, but everything else. They're structuring it to kind of get to the best game they can release. But then the story's mangled. And I think that's why generally indie games get a lot of credit for good storytelling, is because no one messes with my stories. Like, it's not that my writing is better than a AAA writer. It's definitely not. But because it's not being,
congratulations on your writing nomination, by the way. I didn't bring that up at the beginning of the show.
What nomination? Writers Guild Award. Wow, yeah. What an honour. No, that's cool. I won't win, but it's very flattering to be on the list. It's very flattering to be on the list. I think there's another game on that list which will definitely beat me.
Yes.
But yeah, so...
But it's still an honour to be nominated for Subsurface Circular, so...
It is. Excellent plug. But like... It's not that I'm a better writer, it's that no one's messing with my story. And I think that's the big one, is just... And I think you're right, I think AAA is getting better at respecting the importance of story, and therefore we're seeing better stories kind of surviving the development process, essentially. Because it's not like with a movie where you write a script and then that's Bible. That's not how games have traditionally been written and still aren't. But the studios that respect the story and the importance of the story and don't mess with it generally are the ones that release the games with better stories. And that's not rocket science. It's not that they're genius writers. It's just going through the motions of telling a good story with causality and character motivation and development and all of these fun things that we like to do. The other question there was editing, right?
Yeah, before we get to that, though, Greg, the thing about the question as well is there are videos you can watch now that explore this a lot more. There's plenty of GDC videos now from writers that can help shine a little bit more light into this process.
On the internal process.
Yeah, on the internal process. One of the great ones that is generally available is Anthony Birch, who was the writer on Borderlands 2, did a really, really amazing GDC talk where he talked about the challenges of Borderlands 2, but then they had all of those DLC packs and that the writing that went into those DLC packs and the lessons learned off of each thing. And that's another sort of weird aspect about games as well, is that you don't know what the audience is going to hook onto until the audience sort of gets to see what's going on. So for something like Borderlands 2, one of the lessons they started learning while they were going through the DLC packs is people just love the characters. They just love the banter. Like just banter. Don't try to like structure this or like do anything, like just banter. That doesn't work for everyone. But yeah, I would strongly encourage going to the GDC Vault if you want to learn more about stories. And these are pretty well paced. They're definitely folks that know how to speak and keep you entertained, but also provide a lot of information on the writing structure of games and what goes wrong with them. So anyway, also could you talk about your writing editing process for your games, Mike? Because I'm not involved in that.
You're not involved in that. Because I'm a monster. Well, the writing, So there is no editor on our games. I write, and when I feel it's done, it's done. That's the short version.
Not entirely accurate, but yes, the short version.
It's not. No, what we tend to do is I write until I think it's done. We get it in the game, then playtesting happens, and I tweak and finesse based on what experiences people are having. Yeah, I'm painting a negative image of myself, but we don't have a formal. There is no formal editor in the kind of the writing sense of like writing a book or whatever. I think largely because so much of game writing, especially from a scale of studio like ours, like I know I'm constantly having to imagine what the end thing's going to be like, and the editor would have to be as good as me at seeing what the end product's going to be like, and also have the same idea of what the end product's going to be like as me in order to know where things are going to slot in. It's a conversation we have a lot, right, where you'll look at a piece of art in isolation. This happened yesterday, right, where there's a piece of art in isolation where you're like, why are we doing this like X, Y, Z? It's like, oh, because once that's in game, that bit of the character will be there, so that has to be there. So, you know, it's that kind of thing.
A lot of it is context, especially with games. There are things that when you see the script of a game, you know, if you're not the writer, there's a portion of trust that needs to go into, okay, I'm not entirely sure I get what's going on here, but maybe it'll come
together once.
And then when you play it in the game, that works.
Yeah.
That totally makes sense.
And there's a big. I mean that's being a creative director and a writer in general. Is just the team has to really trust that I've got an idea in my head of where we're heading, which usually I do, so it's fine.
But it is the same challenges that, you know, you'll see with games that you sort of see in movies that you won't necessarily see in a book, right? Like or a script, because that one, yes, it is up to the interpretation of the reader how they feel about what is happening there. But in something like a movie, you know, or
an editor
games,
of a book is as qualified to have an opinion of what the book is going to like. If you're looking at a draft for a book, your opinion, you're looking at the completed whole.
Yeah.
Whereas, yeah, if you're looking at the script for a game, you're looking at like 10% of the final storytelling. So we don't have an editor. I write. I'll write through. You know, usually I start to feel happy with it about draft 7, somewhere around there, 7 or 8. Depending on the kind of game. So with Subsurface, I actually got it into Engine very quickly. So like draft 2 or 3 of Subsurface was actually like interactable, and you could play it like a Subsurface level. And then it's just iteration, just fiddling with it, changing a line here which changes the flow of something, and just kind of finessing and running through it, and just kind of just tweaking in the margins. And at a point where I'm ready, I then pass that to playtesters, Alexander, the rest of the team, and say, like, you know, how do you feel about this? And gather those opinions, and then working on based on. Usually, it's not so much like if they like it or not. It's if they're feeling the same way as I am at different points. Like, if Alexander comes back to me and says, this is rubbish, that's not very useful feedback. If Alexander comes back to me and says, I'm really angry at this character in scene 3, and I'm thinking to myself, but you're meant to be in love with that character in scene 3, you know, that's a warning sign to me. It's about intent. It's about, by that point as a writer, I know what I want the story to be. I don't want them to tell me, oh, I don't like the ending. It's more, am I achieving the ending I wanted to achieve? It's that kind of thing. So it's more of a kind of checking my intent and making sure that I'm doing what I mean to do. Because that's usually 9 times out of 10, that's the problem, is when you're trying to do something and you get it wrong. Very rarely do writers, I think, at that stage, after several redrafts, are they actually doing something terrible? Usually it's that they're doing something good terribly.
So yeah, I'll let you know about my game writing process when I eventually
write a game.
When I do that,
write a game. Write a game.
It's funny. I have absolutely been writing. Oh God, more than half my life at this point. And then a third.
Have you written much fiction?
I did when I was younger. But then, you know, during my professional career, it was it really was a lot of, obviously nonfiction writing, no matter what certain politicians might tell you. But yeah, it's
or indeed readers.
Or readers. But yeah, no, it was a lot of nonfiction, and then of course it's news structure, which has a very specific,
which puts you into a rhythm that maybe is counterintuitive to fiction.
Yeah,
it's a really interesting thing I've been doing. I was listening to yesterday. I was listening to Glengarry Glen Ross, the stage play, and then the movie, obviously that everyone's seen. But the it's brilliant, but like the repetition that works in a script for theatre, like of words, like phrases, like very, very kind of rhythmic language, which would be terrible to read. I was listening to it thinking, oh, well, maybe this could be something that could inform my writing. And then you're like, no, if you were reading that through, it would feel awful and repetitive. And it's those kind of, adapting those structures.
Yeah, one of the challenges, absolutely one of the challenges for me, and I'm curious to see, if I ever do a game, like how that plays out from a writing standpoint, is because I wrote online, my brain is sort of broken from from the way. So the way a newspaper article is written is that you do the nut graph, which is the who, what, where, when, why. You do that. Typically, the second paragraph is a quote, and then the third paragraph through paragraph 7 usually is giving detail or background to what is going on.
Online story, right?
Yeah, online writing, totally different because hyperlinks. So I absolutely know now, and if you're a listener to the show for a long time, you probably can now, like the minute I do this, it'll spoil it in your head. But I think in hyperlinks now. I will introduce something, then do a quote, but then the explanation of that story or that concept is hyperlinked in my brain. Like I will get to certain words, and then I will stop the conversation when I am explaining something to somebody and say, do you know who this, like, do you understand the context of this thing? Like, and it's super weird, and it works fine in this context because I'll tangent automatically, just assuming that. But if you're having a normal conversation with a normal person and they ask you to explain something, it's like, okay, I will give the full overview, then I'll probably like give a little bit of detail on the person that it involves, but then every detail after that is checking with them constantly of like, hey, here's this thing. Do you know about this thing? Because if you know about this thing, then I'm not going to bother you with explaining it. I'm just going to move on to the next thing. But it's this constant like, would you like to know more? Would you like to know more?
But that's, that would be, I think you should lean into that. I think you should try writing some fiction that poses as nonfiction. Like do like a Max Brooks style, World War Z style thing that's faking news reporting or whatever. I mean, the best example of this from our recent past is, I wrote Subsurface Circular as a simulation of talking to people on a social network, right? Like that's something I do quite a bit. So that was something I decided to write, So I would like to see you do some fiction. So give that a play at some point.
If you have a burning question about games, game development, or just about the complexities of the universe, you can send those questions to us via contact@BithelGames.com. That's contact@BithelGames.com, through the YouTube comments of this show, or on Twitter by pinging at Mike Bithell or at Slawinski. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Bithell Games Podcast. We can always use your support, so please provide reviews and 5 stars on iTunes, likes and subscribes on YouTube, and positive reinforcement on whatever other platforms you're hearing this show on whenever possible. And if you like our games, leave a review for those too. Nice ones are the best. This podcast was produced by Jonathan Dowden. We'll be back next week. I'm Alexander Slawinski. Thanks again, and get in the last word, Mike.
Crunchy.